beginning of this story unfolds in Great Xuan, a mighty empire whose influence stretched far beyond the known lands. In the very heart of the capital, Xuanjing, stood the luxurious residence of the Grand Tutor. Festive atmosphere filled the inner courtyard. Young maidens surrounded the Grand Tutor with respect, offering him cups of wine and earnestly urging him to share this ceremonial evening with them. On that day, many people had gathered in the residence. Officials, scholars, and noble guests bowed one after another, congratulating the Grand Tutor on his birthday. In a little over 50 years, he had risen from poverty to become a man who stood above nearly everyone in the empire. Power of the Grand Tutor overshadowed the entire world. The story of his rise alone, filled with trials, intrigue, and triumph, could have become a novel millions of words long. When a man named Li Fan first arrived in this world, he was nothing more than a poor, life-worn scholar forced to struggle for every chance to survive. Now, having reached the height of power, fame, and wealth, it was difficult to imagine what else he could possibly desire from fate. Celebration continued. Dancers of breathtaking beauty and grace displayed their art before the guests, filling the hall with music, movement, and an atmosphere of luxury. Suddenly, the calm of the celebration was shattered. A distressed man rushed into the residence and reported that a fiery rain had begun in the heavens. Many took it for a divine sign, but it soon became clear that it might not be a blessing at all. The blazing stream seemed to be heading straight for the Grand Tutor's residence. The moment the Grand Tutor stepped outside and raised his eyes to the sky, he saw two figures suspended high above. One of them was pursuing the other and fiercely trying to stop him from crossing a dangerous boundary. Grand Tutor immediately understood that these were not ordinary men, but cultivators. The others, stunned by what they saw, dropped to their knees, taking the sight as a favorable omen, and believing that a true immortal master had appeared before the world. Grand Tutor himself watched with dark bewilderment, unable to understand how such a thing could even happen in this world. Meanwhile, one of the cultivators in the sky could not comprehend whether his opponent, Ku Hong, truly believed he could save himself simply by fleeing to the land of fallen immortals. In his eyes, the fugitive had only one path left: to hand over the cultivation method he had once obtained. Otherwise, it would all inevitably end with the death of one of them. Hong regarded such demands as a mockery. It was precisely because he lacked a core formation method that he had remained stuck at the foundation establishment stage for a full 100 years. His lifespan was already nearing its end, and he was on the verge of turning to dust. How could he possibly hand such a precious method over to someone else? The path of the Golden Core is a road that each person must walk alone. Though there are many core formation methods in the world, there are far more people who remain trapped forever at the foundation establishment stage. That was exactly why the pursuer could not allow Ku Hong to escape. Before him stood the very path to immortality. There was bitter irony in it. For more than 100 years, they had considered each other brothers on the path of cultivation, yet now they had drawn their blades against one another for a fragile chance at survival. Hong understood perfectly well that he was inferior to his opponent. It seemed that today he truly would not escape his fate. And yet there were far too many mortals around them, and he became curious whether his enemy could endure such a dense concentration of immortal and mortal miasma. Realizing his opponent's intentions, the pursuer drew his sword, preparing to stop him at once. Hong was certain that he would have a chance to survive if this man could not withstand the power of the immortal and mortal miasma. In the next instant, the two techniques collided in the heavens, and a thunderous explosion erupted. Watching it all unfold, the Grand Tutor could only curse them both in his mind. He opened his eyes among the ruins of his own residence. The bodies of his wife and children lay before him, and everything that had once been his home had turned into shattered debris. Once lively and prosperous Xuanjing had been transformed into a true bloody hell. Everywhere he looked there were mutilated corpses, collapsed buildings, and streets soaked in blood. After such a disaster, it seemed that not even one person out of 100 had survived. Drop of blood spilled that day was the result of two cultivators who had suddenly descended upon this world. Grand Tutor let out a bitter laugh. How could cultivators possibly exist in this world? From the very day he became an official, he had used all his power and influence to search for even the faintest trace of the path to immortality. When he rose to the position of Grand Tutor, standing above nearly everyone else, he searched the entire world. He explored the frozen seas, the great oceans, the echoing abyss, and the endless mountain ranges. Yet throughout all of Great Xuan, there was not even the slightest proof that immortals truly existed. With time, he had accepted this and grown old, leaving those dreams behind. Yet now a tormenting question stood before him. Were those two truly immortals, and where had they come from? It felt as though fate itself was mocking him. The Grand Tutor summoned Huan Zhen. When truth becomes falsehood, falsehood becomes truth. The charge was complete. The illusory system had fully activated. The return to the origin point had begun. He had named his unique treasure Huan Zhen. With it, truth could be turned into illusion and reality into a simulated illusion. It allowed everything he had experienced to be converted into an illusion and returned him to a chosen point in time, the moment he had first transmigrated into this world. In truth, this was already his second life after arriving in Great Xuan. In his first life, despite all his ambitions, he had been nothing more than an ordinary man. Li Fan had dreamed of becoming the Zhongyuan, yet he failed the imperial examinations again and again. After turning 30, he abandoned that dream and opened a small business. He became a wealthy head of household, married, had children, and lived a quiet and unremarkable life. Only in extreme old age, as he lay on the brink of death, did the unique treasure Huan Zhen finally awaken within him. It was this treasure that forced him into an unstoppable return to a second life. Once the Huan Zhen system was fully charged, it allowed him to restart his life and return to a chosen starting point to begin again. He could not restart everything immediately, for there were still unfinished matters in this life. The Grand Tutor ordered that troops be sent in an organized formation into Xuanjing to restore order after the catastrophe. Most of the buildings had been destroyed. Once the garrison took control of the city, reconstruction could proceed more quickly. More importantly, the Grand Tutor would be able to remain in the camp, supervise the rebuilding, and secretly send people to search for the two cultivators. After a month, the ruined city of Xuanjing slowly began to return to life. A few months later, the city that had survived the disaster had regained at least some semblance of order. Soon the Grand Tutor received a report that there was still no news of the two cultivators. It seemed he should not have placed his hopes on that matter after all. In that case, there was nothing left in this life worth holding on to, so he summoned his treasure once more. Grand Tutor decided to virtualize the current scenario and return to the original starting point. Dao Xuanzi and Ku Hong. Even 50 years later, he would still be waiting for them in Xuanjing. After that, he ordered the treasure to restart his life and return him to the first year of the starting point. Return to the first year happened swiftly. Overwhelmed with joy, he behaved so restlessly that his aunt almost forced him to drink a bowl of water prepared by the village witch to drive away evil spirits. Half a year he passed the provincial examination. Although he only placed 30th, he still became a Jurin and brought honor to his ancestors. In the second year, he passed the metropolitan examination and successfully advanced through the palace examination, placing second and earning the title of Jinshi. Using his connections in Xuanjing, he obtained the position of magistrate of Wen County in the Jiangnan region. In the third year, he began forming his own circle of trusted followers, and soon afterwards secretly produced the first batch of explosives and matchlock firearms. In the fifth year, refugees rose in rebellion against the residents of Prince Lanya. Li Fan led the troops and saved the prince, who from that moment onward remained deeply indebted to him. In the sixth year, he was promoted to prefect of Jianghuai and married the daughter of the vice minister of ceremonies. In the seventh year, his wife gave birth to a son. In the 10th year, Princess Lanya also gave birth to a son, and Li Fan personally came to offer congratulations and present a carefully prepared gift. In the 15th year, the emperor died. Prince Lanya inherited the throne and proclaimed a new era, Xuanjing. The new emperor summoned Li Fan to the capital, appointed him deputy minister of war, and ordered him to lead the army to suppress a rebellion. In the 18th year, he crushed the rebel armies. The emperor withdrew his military authority but promoted him to minister of war and appointed him grand tutor to the crown prince. In the 20th year, the empress was accused of witchcraft. Enraged, Emperor Xuanjing imprisoned her in the cold palace. The Crown Prince secretly sought Li Fan's help, and he agreed without hesitation. After conducting a hidden investigation, Li Fan discovered the person who had slandered the Empress and cleared her name. However, Xuanjing still refused to release her from confinement. In the 25th year, Li Fan received secret news. Someone had reported that he had been visiting the Empress in the Cold Palace. In that same year, Emperor Xuanjing was assassinated during a journey. The Empress was released, and the Crown Prince ascended the throne, declaring the reign era caning. In the 26th year, Li Fan was once again elevated to the position of Grand Tutor and appointed senior scholar of the Council of Affairs. He used this opportunity to suppress dissent and build his own faction at court. By the 30th year, the entire realm knew only the name of the Grand Tutor rather than that of the Emperor. In the 31st year, the Dowager Empress became pregnant and gave birth to his son. In the 38th year, Emperor Caning died from deep melancholy. In the 40th year, the Dowager Empress died of illness. In the 43rd year, Li Fan's wife passed away. In the 46th year, his eldest son died from illness. And in the 50th year, two immortals emerged from the echoing abyss, destroying Caning, while the Grand Tutor miraculously survived. Simulation was complete. He could now choose one of several options to preserve. One item he possessed during the simulation, his cultivation level achieved in the simulation, the memory of a close person he could inherit, or refuse the choice to accelerate the recharge process. Reality become an illusion, or had everything from the beginning been nothing more than a simulation? Perhaps it was merely a flaw of perception created by the overwhelming realism of it all. Or perhaps, at some deeper level, the boundary between truth and falsehood simply ceased to exist. For the moment, however, he decided not to dwell on such thoughts. It was far more reasonable to first carefully examine the four options before him. First two options were perfectly clear. If he had already stepped onto the path of immortality, they might have been extremely valuable. But in his previous life, he had remained nothing more than a mortal, so they were of little use now. Third option seemed far more dangerous. It was impossible to predict what inheriting someone else's memories might lead to. Stability was far more important. In the end, the only truly rational choice was the fourth option. Virtualization required the accumulation of energy. When faced with a fatal wound, Xuanzhen would automatically consume part of its charge to protect its owner. That was why in his previous life Li Fan had escaped death more than once at the very last moment. Therefore, the fourth option was the most reliable and stable. The best decision was to accelerate the recharge process. A status window appeared before Li Fan once again. Across 3 lifetimes, he had already lived 166 years. His gaze then shifted to the limit of mental age. In his previous life, it had barely exceeded 900 years, but now it had already crossed the threshold of 1,000. When a person carries too many memories, the mind gradually reaches its limit. The excessive burden of the past can crush the soul. This is what is known as the erosion of time. However, the limit of mental age can be expanded through the tempering of will and the strengthening of the spirit. Once one steps onto the path of immortality, all of this becomes meaningless. The goal of this life was perfectly clear, to uncover the secrets of cultivation from those two. In 50 years, they would appear again in Xuanjing. If Li Fan prepared in advance, he might have a chance to defeat them. Aside from weapons and explosives, he should also rely on the immortal and mortal miasma they had mentioned during their battle. However, he had no intention of spending those 50 years doing nothing. The two cultivators had come from the echoing abyss in the east, and that was exactly where he needed to begin. For a start, Li Fan decided to send people to explore its depths. Most terrifying thing in life is to have no purpose. In his previous life, he often woke in the middle of the night beside the Dowager Empress, feeling nothing but emptiness and confusion. Back then, he had already stood at the peak of the human path, and there was nowhere left to go. Even another reincarnation would have changed nothing. He had possessed power, pleasure, and everything a mortal could possibly desire. Yet after experiencing it all again and again, he had lost any taste for it, as if chewing on tasteless wax. Perhaps in one of his future reincarnations, he might have willingly chosen death himself. The appearance of those two had revealed an entirely different path. It was as though a strange and alluring world had suddenly opened before him, silently calling him toward it. Li Fan wanted to cultivate, He longed for eternal life, and no one would be able to stop him. Exactly 50 years later, he would meet Dao Xuanzi and Ku Hong again.